Warning: viewer discretion is advised. Hi friends, welcome to Meals to Unalive 4, where we talk about a true crime case and make a death row meal from scratch. I'm your host Jody Breton, and if you enjoy this episode, please like and subscribe. I'm on TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, all the things, so come find me. Today we're talking about the Hilltop Rapist, otherwise known as Darrel Keith Rich. This is one of those cases where if anybody deserves the big sleep penalty, as I call it, it's for sure this guy. He's just diabolical, and you can tell that there's really no remorse there. But anyway, I digress, so let me jump into it. Darrel Keith Rich was born on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1955, in California. He had a blood ancestry that was 1/4 Cherokee. He was adopted by a family where he had a domineering mother who had a job watching after multiple children. Due to her attention being on other children often, this led to Darrel resenting his mother. When Darrel was in grammar school, he would end up being held back a grade, which led him to being referred to a school psychologist for evaluation. The school psychologist was concerned that Rich had a high likelihood of becoming violent as he aged, but he did not receive any treatment for this concern. I hate when I hear stuff like this. Why don't people get their kids help? If a professional told you that he has a high likelihood of becoming violent, why would you not try to help them? It never makes any sense to me. After his parents divorced at the age of 15 years old, Darrel began exhibiting signs of suicidal behavior. He began living with his mother in Southern California, but would later return to living with his father in Northern California, during which time he was suspended from school for fighting. When Darrel was 17 years old, he went hunting after a fight with his girlfriend and attempted suicide by shooting himself in the chest. He later also shot over a police vehicle in an attempt to suicide by cop. Upon his arrest, he was given a psychiatric evaluation and was determined to be suicidal and recommended to have immediate treatment. Well, I don't think it took a full evaluation to determine that he was suicidal and needed a lot more help, but I'm not a doctor. However, Darrel would reject all offers of therapy. In years following, he would continue to have run-ins with the law, including DUI, road rage, and assaulting another person with a tire iron. In the summer of 1978, Darrel would go on a spree of sexual assault and murder over the span of about 2 months, earning him the moniker the Hilltop Rapist. The following are the incidents that took place over that time, but I've removed the names of any survivors to afford them the privacy that they deserve. On June 13th, 1978, Darrel abducted a 25-year-old woman as she was walking across a bridge in Redding, California, as she was heading to a nearby market. She was attacked from behind, shoved down a steep hill, and sexually assaulted, with Darrel quoted by her later as asking her to perform oral. The woman refused and was repeatedly struck in the head at least 10 times, fracturing her skull. She was abandoned there, left for dead, but was found still alive 12 hours later. Thank God she survived. I'm just glad that she was okay, because not all of the women that we're reading about were so lucky. Just 6 days later, on June 19th, Darrel pulled up alongside a 21-year-old woman walking near her home in Redding and offered her a ride. Upon her refusing his offer, Darrel became persistent, so she ran. Darrel caught up to her and grabbed her, covering her mouth to silence her, and carried her to his car before finding a dark, deserted area. Once there, he blindfolded her with a shirt and forced her to perform oral and essayed her, telling her that if she told anyone, he knew where she lived and would kill her if she spoke up. Darrel would later brag of this event to his friends that it was, quote, pretty easy to do. Look, I know that he's already passed on, but bring him back and someone get the wood chipper. I'm just saying. On June 25th, Rich would repeat this event, coming upon a 14-year-old girl. pulling up alongside her, walking with her boyfriend, offering them a ride, which they sadly accepted. As her boyfriend opened a door and Lisa climbed in, Darrel grabbed her and quickly pulled her in and drove off, finding another dark, deserted area where he attempted to sexually assault her, then sodomized her before releasing her. On July 4th, 1978, Darrel would have 2 victims in one day. The first was a 19-year-old woman he grabbed who fought until he wound up knocking her unconscious. As she woke up, she was being rolled toward a body of water and began to struggle. He ripped her shirt off and forced her to remove her pants before using them as a blindfold and sexually assaulted her before ordering her to not look up and left her alive. The second victim was 19-year-old Annette Edwards. She was abducted while walking home from a firework display celebrating Independence Day. Her body would be found 3 days later, 2 miles away from her apartment, about 75 feet down an embankment off a country road. She was found lying on her back with her tank top pulled up, revealing her breasts and her panties pulled below her knees. The blood-stained trash can and other evidence was also found near her body. The autopsy would reveal severe injuries to her face and head. Her upper jaw received 2 fractures and numerous other injuries and bruises to her body. The cause of death being listed as skull fractures inflicted by blunt force. This would become Darrel's first confirmed murder. On July 19th, Darrel would pull up to another 15-year-old girl who was returning home by bicycle from her cousin's house. As she was heading home, Darrel passed her and asked for the time before grabbing her by the hair and hitting her in the eye before throwing her in his car. He drove her to Cottonwood and forced her to perform oral. He then drove to a second place, threatening to hit her in the head with a flashlight if she didn't listen, while claiming to also have a gun under his seat and a dead body in the trunk. Once they arrived at the second location, he would sexually assault her. On August 3rd, 1978, 17-year-old beauty contest winner Patricia Moore from Petaluma was visiting Redding, where she would disappear from a motel. Her nude body was found 2 weeks later at the Igo dump on August 20th by sheriff deputies in the lotus position. The autopsy would describe the front of her head being crushed by a heavy object, most likely a rock, as well as evidence of manual strangulation. On August 8th, Linda Slavic, a mother, went to a bar with a friend in Chico. Her friend left her alone at the bar around 1 a.m. before returning approximately 45 minutes later to find that Linda had left. Darrel had brought Linda to the dump and showed her the body of Patricia before executing her as she begged for her life. Darrel would later boast to his friends that her last words, "Don't do it, don't do it." On the same day of August 20th, her body was found 20 feet away from Patricia Moore's body at the Igo dump. She had been shot twice, the first through her neck and the second through her mouth that severed the spinal column and caused an instant death. Then, on August 13th, still in that same 2-month span, Annette Sellex disappeared at 11 years old while going to a market near her home in Cottonwood in the evening to buy groceries. Her body was found the following day, badly fractured 105 feet below a bridge on Interstate 5 near Shasta Lake. Her body was found stripped naked except for her panties. The autopsy would show that she was still alive when thrown from the bridge and had been forcibly assaulted and forced to perform oral. She also had bite marks on her thigh that would later be positively determined to have been inflicted by Darrel. Darrel would also later admit to having thrown her off the bridge. Around mid-August 1978, Darrel was riding a street bike and asked a friend if he would like to go dirt bike riding, but his friend declined. About 20 to 30 minutes later, Darrel returned and told his friend that he found a human body, which he led his friend to at the Igo dump. However, the friend noticed that there was no bike tire marks showing that he had ridden to the dump, nor could he have made it there and back from where his friend lived in that short time span. So feeling something was indeed very wrong, he called the police from the nearest telephone, launching an investigation. Good for him. I'm glad that he called because obviously something was very wrong. In the course of the investigation into Annette Sellex, officers interviewed Darrel, but he was not a suspect at that time. He was simply interviewed for about an hour because he had worked with Selig's mother. At the end, he asked if he would submit to a polygraph examination on the Selig murder, to which he agreed. The next day, he arrived at the Shasta County Sheriff's Department at 4 p.m. Detective Brewer of the Sheriff's Department had learned that Darrel had reported finding bodies at the dump, and he was asked about that, to which he replied he only saw one, not two. Deciding that they really didn't have much to connect him to the Selig's murder, they decided to use the polygraph to ask about the Slavic and Moore murders. He was read his Miranda rights, to which he waived them. The interview would last about 15 minutes, in which one of the questions would include whether he was the murderer of the girl whose body he found at the Igo dump. At the end of the exam, the examiner told Detective Brewer that the results were specifically saying that he was being deceptive around the questions related to being the murderer, to which Brewer would return to ask him further questions. When told he was the only suspect to have failed the polygraph, appearing to lie, Darrel claimed that the test seemed to be given fairly and had no idea how it would claim that he was lying. He would become nervous, avoiding eye contact and pausing for long periods of time before responding to any questions, while stating multiple times that he was going to leave. When Darrel did finally leave, he told Detective Brewer, "I've got something to tell you, but now," informing the detective that he would call in a few days before asking for his business card. Detective Brewer asked when to expect such a call, to which Darrel replied, "In 3 days," and left. Darrel would then go to a friend's house and discuss the failed test with that friend and their girlfriend. When they asked did he do it, he stated that he indeed had, but that the Hells Angels had paid him $7,000 to kill her. Also, if you don't know who the Hells Angels are, they're a biker gang. When asked about the second body, he also said yes, having met her at the Madison Beer Gardens in Chico, and killed her because, quote, she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He then acted out the kidnap and murder of Linda Slavic, telling his friends, quote, I shot her in the head and the neck with a .22, before throwing the pistol in a river where police would never find it. He said the .22 rifle used on the other woman was at his mother's house. Later, the friend's girlfriend would contact the sheriff's department and give them a written statement. At 9 p.m. that same evening, Darrel saw two friends at the liquor store. He approached them and attempted the same story, claiming he failed the lie detector and needed an alibi by 7 the next day or he would be picked up, further claiming he did it for $7,000. These friends would also go on to call the police. Man, this guy is just telling everybody and anybody who will listen that he committed murder. Like, why would you tell everybody that? He's not very smart, but I guess that's a good thing. Detective Brewer received this info as it came in and immediately went to find and arrest him. Darrel's motorcycle was found outside the Orlock Bar in Reading. Around 11 p.m., Darrel was placed under arrest. He was interviewed for 2 hours, to which he confessed to various murders, leading to a transcript of 45 pages in length. With Darrel's consent, officers would be back to the bar and search his vehicle before Brewer would drive Darrel around the area as he pointed out where evidence could be found, including the gun at his mother's house, where Darrel led him to the closet and handed the rifle to detectives. As the investigation continued, eventually Darrel would give Lieutenant Eoff a list admitting to what he had done and admitting to killing Annette, as well as having a warrant used to provide his bite match to that of his victim. By December 11th, Darrel was on suicide watch, having tried to hang himself, and Detective Lambert a letter that stated, I didn't kill anyone that I hadn't said I did. I'm telling you the truth, whatever, I hate myself, God help me. What a cop-out. He sounds like a teenage girl, honestly. Like, are we supposed to feel bad for him? Darrel would go on to be convicted of the 4 murders as well as numerous other charges with 4 or 5 other women who survived unhesitatingly as they identified him as their assailant. 22 years after his spree, he would be the 8th inmate to be executed after the death penalty had been reinstated in 1977 in California. In his final days, he clung to his Native American heritage, adopting the name Young Elk. His last day, he visited with relatives and American Indian spiritual advisors. His lawyers tried to get him the right to have a sweat lodge ceremony at the prison to make spiritual atonement as a way to try and further the execution last minute, but it was denied as security risks allowing for hot rocks around prisoners as well as it taking hours to perform, and his execution was already scheduled. The victims' families were adamantly opposed to any form of clemency for what Darrel had done. One stating, "He had taken my ability to live in peace," while Patricia's brother spoke at the clemency hearing and said, "I think we should take him to the dump and use a rock, or maybe a gun. No, a gun's too lenient. What he remembers is sexually assaulting her and unaliving her. I want you to take that away from him." Annette's stepfather would add, "We're wasting time, just unalive him. He better pray there's not a life after death. If there is, he better hide." In attendance of his execution were 5 relatives of his victims, plus one of the 5 women who were sexually assaulted, all holding hands with little emotion visible. Slavic's son, who was in attendance, watched dressed in a black suit, with a dark tie covered in white skulls, to which he was seen with a smile on his face once Darrel was declared dead. Darrel was executed on March 15, 2000 at the San Quentin State Prison. He declined any actual last meal, instead drinking just tea, broth, and Gatorade, with his final statement being one word: peace. So since he didn't have a last meal per se, I decided to make a meal based on Northern California. So I made tri-tip with asparagus, potatoes, and a blackberry cobbler, all of which was delicious, and I felt like really got the essence of like Redding itself and Northern California as a whole. That's very much a typical meal here. So let me down in the comments if you like that, if you're okay with it, because I figured you wouldn't want to watch me just pour Gatorade and broth. Honestly, what's heavy on my noggin is, why did he leave some of the women and girls alive and then unalive some of the other ones? Like, what was the difference? I wish I could find that answer, because even in the same day, he would leave one alive and then the other not. And I just wish that we had more answers. But of course, we're not going to at this point. Anyways, let me know down in the comments if you had any thoughts about this episode or questions. I don't know, I've just felt like this was a really heavy one, especially since it involved children. Those are always harder for me to go over in general. As always, guys, I'm here for you every week. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, find me on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, all the things. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.